If I can't get any further than this, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to swap out the motherboard in this case, and I'll try a different Micro ATX motherboard combination. Hello and welcome back to Antique.com. Today I'm going to try my fourth attempt at fixing the Compaq. I've essentially given up with the original motherboard, processor and memory. Thinking back over what's been happening and watching back the videos, I can see that the machine itself was operating to an extent correctly for a while, and then things were starting to go wrong. So I'm beginning to wonder if the original motherboard was suffering from a dry joint crack issue, where as things would warm up, things would expand, and then I would start getting memory issues, processor locking up, issues like that, which originally led me to believe that it was the processor itself. So I swapped the processor with no difference. I swapped the memory a couple of 3 times, again with no difference. Each time what would happen was the machine would boot, it would load an operating system, but then it would start getting blue screens of death when I tried to install any drivers. This is an ATX motherboard with an ATX power supply, but the ATX functionality wouldn't work. This machine wouldn't shut down and it wouldn't reboot, it would just lock up. So one has to wonder if the problem is actually the motherboard. So as I say, what I've done is I've taken this motherboard out, I put it to one side, and what I have got is another Micro ATX motherboard, this being an Intel Pentium 4 3 gigahertz with a bit of onboard everything. So apart from the issue of the various jumpers that I'll need to route to the different channels on the motherboard, which is going to take a bit of time to do, and also that this is serial ATA as well as IDE, so I've got a bit of a choice over what I do with the hard drives. I think this might be an interesting way forward for this machine. We'll see as we go along. So anyway, I'll start to assemble this and we'll catch up as we go along. Okay, so the motherboard is in the case now. Luckily for me, all of the relevant screws all lined up with the various fixtures on the case itself. I've also added some thermal paste and put a decent heatsink on, and the important factor is that with the power supply in here, there's still a good inch or so of room above this to the power supply. I'm not sure the cooling will be as good as it would be in a proper size case, but it's an ATX motherboard, sorry, a Micro ATX motherboard, so it would have been designed to fit into small spaces such as this particular case. So I'm going to continue putting a power supply in, plumb up some hard drives, etc. And as for the fittings here, I'll do these right at the very end. In the short term, I can just short these jumper blocks in order to start or stop this machine. There's one clip missing off the memory there. I think I've got an old broken motherboard that I can probably steal one of these clips off to fit in here. If not, hopefully just friction will hold the memory in place, we'll see. So catch me in a bit when the rest of this is put together. Okay, so we're up and running. It's a Pentium 4 3 gigahertz, and what I hadn't realised is a hyper-thread. It's also got 2 gig of RAM now. So let's just, there's nothing plugged in, no IDE drives, no floppy drives, no nothing. It literally just is as this is. So hopefully everything, yep, lovely and cool. it says 5th of September 2010, so I'm sure I'm going to have to change the BIOS battery. Got spares of those now. Let's disable the fast booting and see what it comes up with. Good, it doesn't come up with some proprietary make like Dell, etc., because remember this is a Compaq case, so that's good. So at the 2 GHz as well, it looks like it's using 64 meg for the onboard graphics, which is fine. Okay, so hard drive and floppy are installed now. Found the floppy and found the hard drive. So yep, it's found the hard drive and it's found the floppy drive. So far so good. Interestingly, it's now the 1st of January 2003, where it was September 2010 I think earlier. So yeah, BIOS battery absolutely flat as a dodo, but we're just testing hardware at the moment, not setting it up. So it's all looking fairly messy, but you know, as to be expected. So hard drive, floppy drive, 2 CD-ROM drives, power supply and all the relevant wires all in the way everywhere. This is just a hardware test, as I said, so in this experiment hopefully both of these CD-ROM drives will be found along with the hard drive and the floppy drive. Don't intend on trying to set up any operating systems, as I need to change the BIOS battery, but unless this power supply functionally works properly and the hardware devices are found, there's no point even doing that. I don't particularly want to open a packet for no reason whatsoever. So let's see if I can get it going. So power switch isn't connected, so I've got to use the trusty screwdriver to short the jumper on the motherboard, so bear with me. That's better. So will it find all the devices? Therein lies the question. It looks like it has, but we'll confirm that. Yes. So it's found the CDRW, the DVD-ROM drive and the hard drive. So 1st of January 2003 again. We should make its mind up, but there you go. So optimal settings, supposedly they're always the best. So let's escape. It's probably time to stick a DVD in and see what happens. Okay, so I've rebooted the machine. I decided to put the Windows XP Home DVD in anyway, even though the BIOS isn't set up appropriately, because what I thought I would do is I would run through an installation, because that's actually quite a good way to prove the hardware is working, for no other reason than it's actually using the hardware. Well, I've gained something over the last system in that this actually reboots. Well, it's not exactly a lot to look at, but power supply is in, everything else is in. As I said, I will deal with the jumpers for the motherboard at a later date. For now I'm just shorting it with a screwdriver. However, I have taken out of the front of the case this unit that contained the game port and the 2 USB and sat in there, and I realised that on this motherboard what I had sat to one side was this unit here, which is 2 USB 2 ports and 4 little LEDs, and this has its own little circuit board that sits inside it with the jumpers that go directly onto the motherboard. So without a great bit of imagination, having taken this unit out, I've realised that with a bit of modifying I could trim off both the top and the bottom of this, then remove this itself and just elongate this hole, and I might actually be able to mount this directly in here, giving me back the two front USB ports in the case. I'll lose the gain port, but nobody uses those anymore. Well, I certainly don't use a gain port, so I think that is going to be another modification I'll make for this. So I've got this to modify, and I need to unpick all the wiring for this and maybe slice up this connector block to fit onto the various jumps on the motherboard. At minimum, I need a power button and potentially a reset. The rest, the kind of I don't need. Working. As I say, I still haven't changed the BIOS battery, but I'll get to that. But I just needed to put this together with this power supply and see how it goes. Eventually everything's fitted in quite nicely, and I seem to have a good sort of like 2 centimetre gap between the power supply and the fan. So I think there's enough airflow for that. On the back of the case, you can just about make out here is position for another fan. So I may well position a fan here to try and draw some of the air out from here. There is a slot in the top here that enables airflow to come upwards. But obviously it will just sit in here and drift out, so I'll probably add a fan in to pull the air out. I've got this example and maybe on the inside mounted like so, and then this can go down to the case fan connector that's on the motherboard. So that will be the obvious thing for me to do, is to mount that in there as well for a bit of airflow improvement. So I'll do the BIOS battery, I'll set up the dates correctly, and then we'll take it from there. Okay, so I've taken this little panel off the front, which is the bit, as I say, that plugs into the motherboard. So I know I can pull the pins out of here, maybe just push them directly onto the motherboard. So all I need to do is work out which wire goes to which. Now the good thing about this is that, oh, let's get you back in focus. No, over here, that's better. So the good thing about this is I can see the traces going up to the switch, so I know that the first wire and maybe the second wire, which is going to be this dark blue and white, are actually the power switch. So those two at this end just equate to this first point here. So I'm going to see if I can literally just push this onto the motherboard as is without disassembling anything, see if there's space, and then hopefully I can operate my power switches appropriately. And then I've got power LED and hard drive LED, and I know this motherboard's got them as well, so hopefully I've got everything that's required. Okay, so I've done exactly what I suggested, which was I would use the blue and white wire and just push those on the relevant pins, and I'll leave the rest just floating loose, and the end result is, so I know the power switch wiring and I know it works. I've also changed the BIOS battery, so Okay, so as you can see, it's all back in its case. This is just temporary until I modify this to cut this out to accept this. Once this is in place, I can trim this down to become the front cover, and this sits inside it. So this will all be inside the case, and it will still have its little flip up and down window, which is kind of like one of the design features of this design of case. So yeah, it does look like there's a bloke sticking his tongue out. They work then. Okay, so I've now fitted the front USB that came with this device so that this little sort of design feature of this Compaq in theory can still be used. And the only thing I now need to check is whether or not it works. So I plug in a drive, and yes, everything is seen as it needs to be. Perfect, so all working.